Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most kind. We start another 5090 O level biology paper, November 22, question paper 2020, question paper 2.2. This is another variant. And we're only going to discuss section A because section B and C have been removed from the syllabus. So you can see here the November 22, this is the old syllabus. The first exam is going to be held in 2023. So there is going to be there's only going to be a section A. There is not going to be section B and C is not going to be there anymore. No more essay questions. Question 1. Organs in the human body produce substances which have specific functions. Draw lines to link each organ with the substance it produces and to link each substance with the description of its function. One line has been drawn for you. Draw 5 more lines. This is organ, substance produced, function of substance. So we have adrenal gland, lipase, emulsification of fats in the small intestine. Then we have pancreas, and then bile, conversion of glycogen to glucose, and then we have liver, adrenaline, and chemical digestion of fats. So there are 5 marks and there are 5 lines for which you've got to be able to score these 5 marks. So pancreas is going to be producing lipase, and lipase is going to cause the chemical digestion of fats. Then we have the liver produces bile, right? And what does the bile do? It emulsifies fats. So you connect that with that by emulsification of fats. Then what do we have? Adrenaline, conversion of glucose to glycogen during fight, flight, and fright. It's a fear hormone which is produced when you're fear. So conversion of glycogen to glucose. So here we've got the 5 lines. This is one line, this is the second line, this is the third line, this is the fourth line, and this is the fifth line. So you got your 5 out of 5. And coming to question number 2, the diagram shows a cross section through a leaf when viewed using a light microscope. So A, B. State the term used to describe a group of cells such as those in part A or part B of the leaf cross section. Now what is that? Tissue. Or you could have said mesophyll because these are both mesophyll layers. But of course, if you wrote spongy or palisade, you won't get a mark because that they weren't asking you that. This is a term used to describe a group of cells. The diagram shows an enlargement of one cell from part A of the leaf cross section. So what is part A of the leaf? That's the palisade mesophyll. The diagram shows an enlargement of one cell. Complete the diagram of the cell by drawing and labeling to show the position of one chloroplast and 3 other types of named cell component that will be visible. And this is 4 marks. What could you have possibly drawn was you could have drawn the cell membrane, you could have drawn the nucleus, which would have been larger than the chloroplast. Then you could have labeled the nucleolus or the nuclear membrane. Then you could have labeled a cell membrane, which I've done here. And then cytoplasm, the structure inside its cytoplasm, then the sap or the vacuole. And then you could have labeled the vacuole membrane, which is called tonoplast. So these were all there. So any 3 named cell component that will be visible. So this was what would be visible, any 3 of these. Use a label line on the diagram of the cross section through a leaf to name and label one cell in the lower epidermis that would also contain chloroplast. Naturally, there's the guard cell. So it would be, this would be the guard cell. This would be labeled because it said that you label line said touching the guard cell. So you could have done this, you could have done this, you could have done this, or you could have done this. So it said in the question that you have use a label line on the diagram of the cross section to leaf to name and label one cell in the lower that would also contain chloroplasts. Yeah, naturally. Now, where are chloroplasts present? Just a quick revision. Chloroplasts are present in the palisade mesophyll on the outside. They're also present in the spongy mesophyll. They're not present in the upper epidermis, not in the lower epidermis. But they're only present in the guard cells. Now, these are the guard cells. The 4 can be shown here. So this is the 4 which can be. So guard cells would also have chloroplasts. B part of the question, the cell wall of a plant cell can be removed by treating the cell with a digestive enzyme Name the substrate for this enzyme. Naturally, it will be cellulose. If you use an enzyme cellulase, that will digest the cellulose. So the cell wall can be removed by treating the cell with a digestive enzyme. So cell wall is made up of what? It's made up of cellulose. The enzyme you would use would be cellulase, which of course is present in certain herbivorous animals. They have a four-chambered stomach, and bacteria live in their stomach, and that produces cellulase. Part 2 of the question, some plant cells from part B of the leaf cross section were treated with this enzyme and then placed in distilled water on a microscope slide for 1 hour. The cells were clearly visible using a light microscope at the start of the hour. The cells were not clearly visible using the same light microscope at the end of the hour. Explain changes to the structure of the cell that took place between these two observations. So first, what was happening? The cells were clearly visible at the start of the hour. What did we do? We took the plant cells from part B of the leaf and were treated with the enzyme, so we digested the cell wall and then we placed it in distilled water on a microscope slide for 1 hour. Now the cells were visible in the beginning, but after an hour, then you couldn't see them. What had happened? Something must have happened. Water moves down the water potential gradient, water into the cell, osmosis, increase in size, the pressure, the cell bursts or ruptures. No cell wall is there to stop the rupturing. So you had to give me all that story to be able to get your 4 out of 4 marks. So why they were not visible? Explain changes in the structure that took place between these two. First they were visible, now they were not visible. So they must have probably just burst. So now they're just into pieces, so you can't see the cells as a whole now. So what happened is water moves down the water potential gradient, water moves into the cell by osmosis, there's an increase in size and pressure, and the cells burst or the ruptures because there's no cell wall which is going to stop the rupturing. Question 3. The graph shows how the concentration of lactose sugar changes during the formation of yogurt from milk over a period of 48 hours. So you can see the concentration is decreasing and the time is in hours and takes 48 hours, and the lactose concentration is decreasing when the yogurt is being formed. Now, what are the questions that they're asking you? Now, name the type of microorganism used in the production of yogurt. The type of microorganism is what? It's a bacteria. What type of student are you? You'll have to answer that question. Are you a hardworking student? Are you a regular student? Do you revise regularly when you go home from school? How do you study? How many hours do you study? So, what type of student are you? I don't know, but you have to figure this out because your parents are investing in you and you better be a good student. Just like you criticize us and say, oh, so and so is a good teacher, so and so is a very bad teacher. I don't like that teacher, I don't like that teacher. But you got to figure it out. What sort of a student are you? Are you really hardworking and are you persevering and are you regular? Well, I'm sure you're going to give me some answers to that. Name the type of cell division that causes the population of this microorganism to increase over the 48-hour period. So what was it? It's binary fission. Because bacteria divide by binary fission. I always say B for bacteria, B for binary fission. I do not agree with the mark scheme. It says mitosis is allowed, but I mean in A levels we would not give you a mark for that because that's totally wrong. But maybe in O levels they've allowed you to a mark, but I don't agree with that. Then name the acid produced by this type of microorganism in the formation of yogurt. What is lactic acid or lactate? Right? Then it says draw a line on the graph to show how the concentration of this acid will change during the 48-hour period. Graph was for 2 marks. So when the lactose is decreasing means more of the lactic acid is being produced. So the lactic acid is going to increase. So increasing from the y-axis and increasing as it crosses the lactose line and then levels off at 40 hours and then constant to 48 hours. So this would get you your 2 marks for this part of the question. Then coming to the B part of the question, lactose intolerance is a medical condition that results from a genetic change. A person with the condition is unable to produce molecules of the different enzymes to digest lactose sugar. Name this type of genetic change and explain how it can result in a person being unable to produce molecules of the correct enzyme. What will have happened? Mutation. A mutation must have taken place. Change in the gene or change in the DNA. Then genetic material codes for enzymes. And the active site will not fit the substrate molecule. So that's why it's not going to work. So mutation, change in the gene slash allele slash DNA, and genetic material codes for enzymes. Naturally, if the code is wrong, then that protein will also not be of the right shape and it will not have the same shape of the active site. And the active site will be distorted or the shape will be different, so it doesn't fit the substrate. Then part two of the question. The low concentration of lactose sugar in yogurt makes it a better food than milk for a person with lactose intolerance. Outline the health benefits for some people with lactose intolerance of continuing to include a dairy product such as yogurt in the diet. I mean, so this is a little challenging, this question, because you've got to understand they've said outline the health benefits. So, I mean, if a person takes a lot of calcium, they are actually wanting you to talk about the calcium deficiency. So, will be strong bones, or it will prevent rickets, which is the same mark scheme point. So, the person who has less calcium in their diet, if it's a child, he or she is going to get rickets. And then the teeth are be affected, so teeth will not be strong. Then it is required for growth slash energy, and then vitamin D, or calcium, or protein, or fat. So the health benefits with lactose intolerance continue to have a dairy product. So what does milk contain? Milk and dairy products contain calcium and vitamin D. So vitamin D prevents rickets. So if they're taking milk, then they will not have any rickets. Their teeth will be good and strong. They will have energy. Why? Because calcium is required for certain energy processes as well. And vitamin D is required for the absorption of calcium. Question 4. The diagram shows the internal structure of the human heart and associated blood vessels. Name two blood vessels shown in the diagram that carry oxygenated blood. Now, what are these? One is the aorta. Is the aorta shown here? Yes, this is the aorta coming out of the left ventricle. You have to understand this is the left ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. So this is coming out of it. So this is the aorta. So the aorta is one shown that carry oxygenated blood, and then the other one is the pulmonary vein. Now, which one is the pulmonary vein? This is the pulmonary vein coming in. So the pulmonary vein also brings oxygenated blood from the lungs. So you got your 2 marks if you said that. Then part B says blood flows through a valve and the left ventricle of the heart contracts. So naturally, left ventricle aorta arises from the left ventricle. Diagram 1 shows this valve in the open and closed positions. Label using the letter X on the diagram of the heart the location of this valve. Yeah, here it is. This is where the aorta is coming out. This is where the aorta is going. So you have to write X there. So you got your 1 mark for that. Label using, so there's only 1 mark. So you've labeled using X. So we've written X here. This is the X that we've written here. I just color it another color to make you all realize this is where the aorta is coming out. A small number of people develop a medical condition that cause changes in this valve. Diagram 2 shows the same heart valve in the open and closed position in a person with this condition. Valve open, valve closed. Oh my God, doesn't look very good. Explain how this medical condition will affect the flow of blood when the left ventricle contracts and relaxes. When the left ventricle contracts and relaxes, now what is going to happen? Valve is not going to open or close properly. So when the ventricle contracts and the valve opens, it doesn't open fully. So less blood will flow through the valve. And when the ventricles relax, then the valve closes not fully. So it's going to result in the backflow of blood into the ventricles. So what we have to understand is on this diagram. This is what we need to understand here. When this valve is not going to close, so what is going to happen? Let me explain this to you on this. So what is going to happen if it doesn't close properly? Then the ventricle contracts and the valve doesn't open fully. So there's going to be less blood flowing into the aorta. And if it relaxes and the valve closes not fully, then there's going to be backflow of blood. So the blood is going to flow backward because it doesn't open or close properly. So when the valve does not open or close properly, then the ventricle contracts. You see, this is the ventricle. When it contracts, it's going to push the blood into the aorta. Well, if it doesn't open properly, so there's going to be less blood flowing into the aorta. So less blood through the valve. And when it relaxes, the valve does not close fully. So there's going to be a backflow of blood. So the blood is going to come back into the ventricle because this valve doesn't close properly. There's going to be a partial closure of it. So now you can even see it how I worded it. Valve not open or close fully. So ventricle contracts, but valve does not open fully. So ventricle contracts, so less blood will pass through the valve. When the ventricle relaxes, the valve does not fully close. It should fully close in a normal person, but it doesn't close, so it's going to cause the backflow of blood into the ventricle. Then we come to part 3. It describe and explain the effect of this condition on the ability of the person to exercise. Less ability to exercise. Why? Less oxygen to the muscles. So less aerobic respiration. So less energy released. And anaerobic respiration, if it occurs, that's going to cause the accumulation of lactic acid. You can see for a 3 marks question, there are 7 mark scheme points. How is this person going to be affected? Less ability to exercise. Why? Because there's going to be less oxygenated blood entering the aorta. It's going to be backing up. So less oxygenated gets to the muscle, so less aerobic respiration, so less energy released. So anaerobic respiration might occur, and that will result in the collection of lactic acid, and that will result in cramping. Part C of the question, it is possible for the valve to be replaced by surgery. The human valve is removed from the patient and can be replaced with a valve containing tissue from another species. This tissue is treated with a chemical to prevent rejection by the human body. Suggest how the cells of the tissue are modified by the chemical treatment and explain how this will prevent rejection by the human body. How are you going to work this out? So you remember every cell has an antigen on its surface, which I call the face ID or the surface markings. So suggest how the cells of the tissue are modified by chemical treatment and explain how this will prevent rejection. So number one, the antigens present on this valve, which we are putting into a human being, will have been removed or coated, or they would have made the same as human tissue. So they will not be recognized as a foreign body. So no recognition. Then white blood cells, lymphocytes or phagocytes, they will result in, because there's no recognition, so the white blood cells will not actually mount an immune response. So there'll be a reduced immune response because they don't think it's a foreign cell. It's not a body's own cell. Like for instance, when you do a kidney transplant, the lymphocytes immediately detect that it's not your own kidney and they start to make antibodies against it. So there will be a reduced immune response, and there will be, of course, less antibodies made against it or less phagocytosis done against it. So antigens on the surface of the cells are either removed or blocked, or they're coated and they are not recognized as foreign cells, and so the white blood cells do not cause an immune response, and no or less antibodies will be made, and this valve will not be destroyed by the body's lymphocytes. Last question. A group of scientists investigated the total mass of carbon dioxide released when animals and plants are farmed and then used as food for humans. The total mass of carbon dioxide released for each food in the study included the mass released during production of the food by farming and after the food left the farm and before it was eaten. Suggest and explain how human activity may result in the release of carbon dioxide after food has left the farm on which it was produced. What could transport, processing, refrigeration, packaging, cooking, then waste of the food disposed of, low quality food, so they'll decompose and the microorganisms and the bacteria will respire. Then burning and combustion, and then of course the use of fuel. These points which are given: transport, processing, refrigeration, packaging, cooking, decomposition, burning, and the fuel. You see, candidates, I'm just going to read the exam report to you and then you can probably understand it. Candidates with a good knowledge of the carbon cycle were able to apply their understanding to the context of human food crops and carbon dioxide release. Quite a few appreciated that the food would need transporting or cooking, which would involve the burning of carbon-containing fuels, thus releasing carbon dioxide. Others, although not thinking about the journey of food from farm to human mouth, were able to gain a mark for mentioning continuing respiration of the plants or decomposition of the plants. So these were all the factors which would may result in the release of carbon dioxide after the food has left the farm. Now, coming to the B part of the question, some of the results of the investigation are shown in the table. Food produced: lamb, salmon, chicken, rice, beans, tomatoes. Mass of CO2 released per kilogram of food produced in kilograms. A farmer decides to change production from lamb to beans. Calculate the percentage change in carbon dioxide released per kilogram of food produced. And this is the space for working. And this is in percentage, and you have to give this 3 marks. So think of the 3 mark scheme points. Now, if you look at the percentage formula, which I've just brought in and showed it to you, I think I did this in another paper as well. Now, when you're asked to do percentage change, so what was the final? So the initial was 39.2 and the final was 2.0. So final minus initial, so this minus this. So this will actually come in a minus sign, 37.2. So 37.2 divided by 39.2, which was what? Which was the initial, and then into 100. So what is the answer? The answer is 94.9, or you can say 95. But then, what have we to understand this? This is in negative. So the answer would be negative 95%. Why negative? Because the percentage change from 39.2 has gone into 2.0. So the percentage change is negative 95%. Because final was 2 minus 39.2. So the answer is minus 37.2. So, I mean, of course, we know that from 39.2 it has gone down to 2. So it will be a negative. And this was the sad part, that the students did not write the minus sign. So if you did not write this negative sign, well, you only got 2 marks, because 1 mark is for this and 1 mark is for the 95. But 1 mark is for the negative. If you didn't write the negative, there's 1 mark for the minus. So if you wrote minus 95, or you show the sign for minus also, that would be fine, and that would be the 3 marks. The 3 marks would actually have told you that you need to have 3 marking scheme points, and there was something negative or positive about it. So percentage change formula, this is the percentage change formula. If you don't know it, I'm sure you do it in maths, so you must be knowing it. Part 2. An increasing number of people in some countries choose to eat a diet consisting only of plants. Use the results in the table and your scientific knowledge to explain how this choice of diet may benefit the environment. And this is 4 marks. So how is it going to affect the environment? Why? Because if they just eat plants, So there'll be less carbon dioxide released. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, results in global warming that results in climate change. And then the climate change is going to result in glaciers melting and all those effects. And this is going to result in more desertification. So there's going to be decrease in land for cultivation, and there could be an increase in biodiversity or decrease in methane from animals. You see, you have to understand is that if we just grew plants and we did not have to feed this to animals, so number one, there'll be decrease in methane from animals. Then there would be, of course, less carbon dioxide because we use poultry farms and all this and everything, we use fuel. So, and carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas which could result in climate change. Climate change is underlined. Then this could result in desertifications and glaciers melting. Then decrease in land for cultivation. Why? Because if it becomes deserts, then there will be decrease in land for cultivation. Now, how is this going to increase in biodiversity? Now, you have to understand that growing plants require less land, resulting in reduced loss of natural habitats and therefore biodiversity. Because we keep on cutting down trees so that we can grow crops, and then those crops have to be fed to animals. So you have cows and you have chicken. But if you just grew plants, well, then you won't have the animals to feed. So this is the point that you need to understand, that growing plants requires less land, resulting in reduced loss of natural habitats and therefore biodiversity. We won't cut down trees. We won't cut down forests because now we would only have plants and everybody would just eat plants. We would not need to feed animals. Nobody would eat beef or mutton or chicken. So this is the reason why we say decrease in methane from animals and increase in biodiversity. So please understand this is basically a very interesting question, but a little difficult question. But you have to be very clear on this part of the chapters and this part of the syllabus. That's complete section A, and thank you very much, and all the very best.